Okay, just to start, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. I want to start just maybe if you can give us a little a background into your career and kind of where you grew up and where you are now.
Okay, well, I grew up in a small town in North Dakota called Wymer, North Dakota. It's about 65 miles south of Fargo, so like right in the southeast corner. Grew up there on this farm outside of this town of 500 people. I went to school at the University of North Dakota. Got a journalism degree. Then I worked at the Forum newspaper in Fargo for 4 years. Then I got a job at the Akron Beacon Journal in Ohio, and I worked there for 4 years. And while I was there, I wrote a book called Fargo Rock City. That came out. I got hired by Spin Magazine, so I moved to New York. Then just kind of worked in magazines for about 15 years. Got married, had kids, did all that, and now I've moved to Portland, Oregon, where my wife is originally from, and now I work as a writer here, just kind of writing books from this cabin, which is behind my house.
Awesome. And what is your Minnesota connection? I know it's slight, but you were actually born in Minnesota, right?
I was born in Minnesota. So the closest town that had a hospital to where I grew up was Breckenridge, Minnesota, which is right across the river from Wahpeton, North Dakota. So, I mean, I grew up in Minnesota, but like 5 minutes over the line. But I'll always be, I guess, from Minnesota because of that, I mean, I associate myself as having grown up in North Dakota, but yes. And I've spent a lot of time in Minneapolis. Obviously, I have many friends who live there. And, when you grow up near Fargo, like Minneapolis is the city. So right. Like that, that's kind of where you imagine eventually going if your career expands.
That counts. So tell me about Downtown Owl, because this is the talk of the town right now. When did you write that novel, and what's it about?
Well, it is interesting that this is happening now, because like when I wrote that book, George W. Bush was still president. Like it seems a long time ago to me. But what the idea was it was the first kind of long form fiction I had done, because I had mostly written nonfiction books, and that's what I'm generally known for, is writing nonfiction and journalism. But I did this novel about a small kind of central North Dakota town in 1983 with these sort of three different characters: a high school kid, a new teacher, and an old guy. And they sort of live in this small town where everyone knows everything about each other, even though they have no direct interaction. And it all kind of leads up toward this cataclysmic blizzard that did happen in real life. So it's like the meteorological event that sort of ties this together is actual. There's also like a lot in the book about a guy named Gordon Call, which some of the people watching this probably remember. He was like a guy from Medina, North Dakota, who refused to pay his taxes and got into a gun shootout with federal marshals. And that was huge news when I was like a little guy, because I was born in 72. So like these events would have happened, these fictional events would have happened when I was like 10 or 11. But I write this book and it comes out, and of course there's an audio version of the book as well. And these three characters are voiced by three different people. One was Philip Baker Hall, who's now deceased, but kind of a famous actor, Wiley Wiggins, and this woman, Lily Rave. And she just loved the character she got to portray. And now her and her husband, which is this guy, Hammer Schlenklater, have essentially been working on making this movie since 2009. And it's just finally happening now. I mean, I'm surprised that, because you get used to the idea of having books optioned and then nothing ever happens. I mean, like many people will buy the rights to a story with the intention of making it a TV show or a movie, and then it just never materializes. That's happened with lots of my books. This is the first time we've ever got to the point where they're actually shooting the movie. And it seems like they're shooting it around, Minneapolis and St. Paul right now, and kind of on the outskirts.
And so Lily Rave, was she kind of, people would know her from American Horror Story now, right? Yes, has she been in touch with you since this novel came out?
Yes, I mean, periodic touch. I mean, it's not like, I haven't really been too involved with the details of putting this together, because, you got to let creative people be creative. So when somebody wants to buy your work, you don't want to tell them, micromanage how to do it. You can't just kind of let it happen. We would have she would buy the rights, and then after 3 years, the rights would elapse. Then Adam Scott, who was this guy on the TV show Parks and Recreation, he was on Severance now. He bought the rights for a while, and those elapsed. She bought them back again with her husband, with her partner Hamish, and he's together. They've kind of been going to write and direct this, and it's just, I mean, I have to say, I'm just blown away by their commitment to this, because there were so many. It would have been so easy for them to give up and move on to other projects, and particularly since they both have very good careers, so they clearly really want to do this, and that's very flattering. So now they're trying to kind of put this movie together on an independent budget, and I don't know if it'll be in theaters or if it'll be like on Netflix, or I'm not sure how that will work. I suppose we won't know until it's done, and it'll probably go to film festivals and see what the response is.
Okay, so take me back to that day when you learned that this was actually coming to fruition. They were going to make a movie based on your book. What was going through your head?
Well, skepticism, because that's happened. That day has happened many times in my life. There have been many days when it seemed as though, oh, this thing that you did is now going to become a movie or a TV show or whatever. So every time you hear that, the first thing you think is, oh, sure, great. And they would tell me the people they wanted to have in it, and I'd be like, they all sound famous. That sounds great. Go ahead. I did not actually believe this was going to happen until, like, they said, we're in Minnesota, we're shooting this movie this week. That was, I mean, up until that point, I was like, this all seems theoretical, because as I said, it's not that I had skepticism in them in particular. It's just because that's how it works. I mean, I wrote a novel called The Visible Man that came seemingly so close to being a film so many times that I was like, well, I guess this is just how it is. People buy things, they buy properties, and then they play around with them until a new property comes along. I had a book called Killing Yourself to Live. I think that has been optioned 4 or 5 times. It's never become a movie, and I don't think it ever will. So I'm pleased that this one actually is going to happen, and it's going to be interesting to see if the movie ends up sort of embodying the way I imagine the story initially, because you kind of got to give up your ability to control something when you turn it over to someone else.
Yeah, definitely a lot of anticipation, I'm sure, to see. Do you know what their timeline is for filming? What kind of details do you know about what's going on here in the Twin Cities right now?
I believe they're in the last week of filming right now. So my assumption is that the reason that they are in Minnesota is because a lot of the exterior shots of a small North Dakota town are hard to simulate in a studio or, outside of Hollywood or whatever. It's like, they need things that actually look like, the real rural Midwest. So now it's possible they're going to go back to LA maybe, and maybe there'll be some shots, indoor shots in classrooms and stuff that'll be done there. Maybe right now they're just sort of focusing on more of the kind of the panoramic image of the thing. I don't really know. Maybe it's going to be completely wrapped up in 4 weeks. Like I say, I don't know that much. It's, I'm a long ways away, and at a point in this process, I was like, you guys just do this, just kind of go on your own and see what happens. I'm not going to interfere in any way, because I just know how it is. It's like you're trying to do something, you're trying to make something. You don't want to have a third party being like, well, that's not the way I saw it, or that's not what I want. I mean, if it was a nonfiction project, I'd feel different. Like if it was something that involved me specifically, or real people or whatever, I would be maybe more involved. This is fiction. So you just got to give them freedom, so I had no problem just sort of letting this go.
But it must be pretty cool seeing North Dakota and Minnesota, these Midwestern regions, put on the map like this.
Well, yeah, it is to me, because part of the reason that I wrote this book was that I kind of thought the experience that I had growing up, this sort of kind of rural, northern, pre-cable sort of, obviously pre-internet period of time, would sort of be lost to history. Like there was, I didn't see a situation where this place and this time was in any way going to exist in media as a whole. So I was like, well, I'm in a position now where I can write a book that kind of, in a way, illustrates what this time period was, and what it was like to be there. So I am happy that there's going to be, now like I guess, even a more sort of broadly distributed version of this. Because I mean, that's one thing that's weird about this is you write a book, and even if this movie were to fail horribly, the number of people who see it will still be greater than the number of people who read my book. I mean, it's hard to sell a book to over 100,000 people or whatever. It's pretty easy to have a movie seen by that many people. So in some ways, it's strange to think that, like, basically I'm giving up the collective memory of this book. In the popular imagination going forward, this movie will replace my novel. But the novel will still be on shelves. If people want to read it, they always can. Maybe it'll sell some more copies. Maybe people will buy, Downtown Owl again, even though it's been out for whatever 15 years or whatever. Maybe they'll go back and buy it because a movie's being made. That's exciting to me.
For sure. What do you think they're going to do about the blizzard? Do you think they already shot the blizzard, or is that going to be completely manufactured in Hollywood?
That's a good question, because it can't just be a snowstorm. It has to be kind of like a cataclysmic weather event. Now, when they started shooting, there were all those sort of massive storms happening, like in Western North Dakota. I was like, I wonder if they could just get into a car and drive west till they hit this blizzard and then film all that. But I don't think they did that. Now, they don't seem concerned about this, I guess, because it is possible to simulate anything in a film. I mean, that seems to be the impression I get from them when I talk to them about this. I don't know. I try to think of situations where I have seen this kind of, weather depicted in movies, and there's not a ton of examples. So we'll see. Maybe they'll change it. I don't know. Maybe it's a flood now. Who knows? It's like, maybe they'll just change the story completely. I mean, that is part of my expectation, is that what ends up being this film is probably going to be narratively different than my book, I think, but we'll see.
We'll see. What can you tell us about the confirmed actors in it? Have you been learning more about? I'm seeing more and more articles of people coming in and joining the project. Do you know who's going to be in it?
Yeah. So Lily, like I say, she voiced the school teacher in the book, and I assume she is still playing that character, even though they're going to have to adjust it because she's a different age now. Time has moved on. Ed Harris is probably the biggest name that I can tell from the list of people. He's kind of playing the old guy Horace. Amanda Hudgens is in it. She's famous, but I don't, she's famous with kind of a different generation of people. I know there's somebody from the film Crazy Rich Asians is in this movie. There are different people who were attached at different times. Aubrey Plaza, the actress, was somebody who was attached at one point, and I think in many ways got Sony Films interested in this, like, her involvement, but she's not in it anymore. Michael Shannon for a long time was supposed to be in it. I don't think he's in it now. So the casting does look strong, though. It does seem as though Lily and Hamish are very well connected and have good relationships with a lot of these people. So, I mean, it will be also interesting to see which characters are kind of amplified and which ones become minor characters, because that may be a reflection on who's playing who, Okay,
gotcha. And so it's Sony Productions that's doing it, but you don't know which stream?
Well, no, because I think the way it works now in independent film, this is just kind of my projection, is sort of like, you're given them, you're given a budget to make the film, or I guess this was called like a negative pickup, I think, which means that they had to put the film together before they got the money from Sony. But once they did, they'll make the production, and then I think they first have to understand what they have before they make a decision on where it's going to go. So my assumption is that it'll probably go to film festivals and things like that. There may be somebody who wants to buy it to distribute it. So it might be somebody pays for the making of the movie, somebody pays for the distribution. I don't know how this will work. I'm sure that, in a utopian situation, they would want it in theaters, because if you make a movie, that's where you want it to be. That's more and more difficult, particularly coming out of the pandemic. The film industry has changed. So, I guess whatever happens, I have no personal expectation of what, what it will be. So,
Okay. We'll have to find out all together then. Let's see, what else are we missing? Anything else that you wanted to share about this experience or about what you know about it? I know there's some film spottings at like Highland High School, I think was one, and then Spot Bar too, also in St. Paul was another one. People were kind of, what is going on here? Do you know any more about the locations or?
Well, it's a complicated situation, right? Because there is a pretty stark difference between a bar in even suburban Minneapolis and a bar in a very small North Dakota town. And you have to add in the fact that this is 30 some years ago, right? So this is in the early 80s. So I guess I'll be pretty interested to see if they can find a simulation of a small town North Dakota bar from the 80s still in existence in just outside of Minneapolis. I'm not sure what school that they're using, but I saw a picture of it. Like they said, the director sent me a picture of what it looks like, and it does look kind of like the school's aged more slowly. There's a way that small towns in North Dakota tend to look, and I don't know if it's really possible to replicate that elsewhere. I hope it is, but you never know. I mean, when I remember when I was growing up, watching film or whatever, when something was set in a small town, it didn't look like my version of a small town. It looked like Green Bay or like Indianapolis. I mean, I've often mentioned this. It's like when I was in high school and like you'd hear the John Cougar Mellencamp songs, Small Town. Like I imagine that was like Wyoming. And then I realized like he's talking about like suburban Indianapolis. Like what a vision of a small town is to most of America is still so much bigger than what somebody from North Dakota or South Dakota or Minnesota views as a small town. And the Hamish Linklater, he actually went to Wyoming, I think, just to walk around and see what it was like, maybe. And I think he was somewhat startled by how small it actually was. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a hard. Yeah. When the first time I ever brought my wife home to Wyoming, for example. So she's from Portland, but I met her in Minneapolis and we lived in New York, and I brought her home. This is before we were married. I take her to my town, Wyoming, and we're driving around the town, and I'm kind of explaining various things to her. And then at one point she said, "Okay, I'm ready." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "I'm ready to see the town." And I was like, "This is the town." Like we've driven through it 4 times. This is it. This is the town. Like there's no other town. This is it. And she was like, "What?" This is like, and she was just like, she's like, "Should we get your mom flowers?" And I'm like, "There's no flower shop here. It's like you can't get the New York Times here." It's like it's like I think one advantage of coming from a real small rural places is that you have an understanding of what bigger places are like. I mean, I came from Wyoming, so of course I knew what it was like in Fargo. I'd been to Minneapolis, had that understanding. You see New York and LA on TV shows. You see Chicago on Perfect Strangers or whatever. You have anything that's bigger than you have a kind of an understanding of what that experience is like, but it doesn't work the other way. Like when I lived in New York and I would tell people or explain to people what it was like to grow up in rural North Dakota, they would ask questions like, "Was this Russia?" Like they couldn't believe it. Like the idea of like wedding dances and things that were just sort of really central to the experience of growing up there is very strange to people who come from urban areas.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully they can, capture some of that on some level, even though it's not going to be probably exact. Anything else that I'm missing that you wanted to share about this experience?
Well, I just have to say that Lily and Hamish I really appreciate how much they seem to care about this. I mean, there's just very few things as flattering as having somebody want to take something you've done and to make it into something else while being completely focused on sort of remaining, I guess, true or keeping the integrity of the original thing. This is a ton of years that have passed and they never stopped. I mean, I lost interest before they did. So I really appreciate their tenacity on this, and I just hope that what ends up existing is something that somebody from a small North Dakota or Minnesota town likes. Like, I hope that they see this and they're like, that that's it. That is what it was like in the 80s. This is not an insulting caricature. This is not some sort of, unrealistic manipulation of the experience. I hope that it can be appreciated by people who normally would never see their life or their parents' life or their grandparents' life sort of reflected in a film.
Perfect. Awesome. So just to get the dates correct, so you wrote that it was published in 2008, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then when were the rights bought by
Well,
who?
I think Lily bought the rights in 2009 for
Okay.
3 years and they expired. Adam Scott bought them after that and had them for 3 years. I think there was a little maybe gap where it was unclear if Lily had things going on, then she bought them again. So like
Okay.
they've been, the way
They've been
rights
repeatedly bought over the years and not come to fruition until now. Is that?
Yeah, the way TV and film rights work is that if somebody purchase the option that they give you X amount of dollars for 18 months. They have 18 months to make the film or the television show. And then when those expire, they can get another 18 months, usually for the same price. So essentially they're buying these 3-year options. And if they can put a film or a television show together within those 3 years, then as the creator, like I would become a producer, then I would make like real money or whatever, but so typically they're like these kind of 3-year chunks of time where somebody who wants to create something has that opportunity. And that has happened 3 times with this book.
And do you know a release month or year date? Anything like that? Who's the director?
Well, I believe Lily is directing and Hamish is writing. He wrote the screenplay. Sometimes I see them described as co-directors. I mean, because this is, she's an actress who's never really directed before. He's an actor who's never ever really written before, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know what they're doing. It's just that this is the first time that they've put themselves in a position where they have this much control over the thing. So like, I would guess if they're filming now that the movie would come out next year. That's usually, it's pretty rare for a movie to come out within the same year that it's made, but I don't know any of this either. Like, this is not my life. This is not my world. My world is sitting in this cabin and just typing. So, it's like but even a book, when you finish a book, it takes a year to come out. So I have to assume a movie will take at least that long.